Daniel stepped out of the transport shuttle and looked around. The colony world of Terran 4 was quiet and green, with soft clouds and tall trees that moved gently in the wind. He had only seen pictures before, but now he was finally here. This was his new home, a peaceful planet far from Earth, with no loud cities or crowded streets. Just what he wanted, a fresh start. The duplex he had rented was simple but clean. 2 houses were built side by side, sharing a single wall in the middle. His was on the left. The other side belonged to someone else, though he hadn't met them yet. Daniel dragged his bags inside, took a deep breath, and smiled. After unpacking, he sat on his front porch with a mug of warm synth coffee. The air smelled different here, like rain and flowers. He could hear strange birds singing in the distance. For the first time in months, he felt calm. Later in the evening, while adjusting the solar panels behind the house, Daniel finally saw his neighbor. She stepped out of the other side of the duplex and paused when she noticed him. She looked unusual, definitely not human. She had pale blue skin with a soft glow under the setting sun. Her hair was silver, flowing down past her shoulders, and her ears were small and gently pointed. Her eyes, large and purple, blinked slowly at him. She didn't say anything at first. She just nodded slightly, then turned and walked to her garden. Daniel was surprised, but not alarmed. He knew many species lived peacefully on Terran 4. The colony rules allowed mixed communities. Still, it was the first time he was living this close to someone not human. Later that night, he heard soft footsteps through the shared wall. Nothing loud. Maybe she was just walking around her home. But the walls seemed thinner than expected. Every few minutes, he caught small, odd sounds, like faint humming or tapping. He told himself it was fine. He was just not used to it yet. New place, new neighbors. He would get used to it. The next morning, Daniel went to the local market to buy supplies. The small village was filled with both humans and aliens, farmers, builders, and traders. Everyone seemed friendly. He stopped by a stall run by an older alien woman. She had deep green skin and 4 arms. She smiled and handed him a basket of fresh fruit. "You're new," she said. "Yes," Daniel replied. "Just moved into the duplex on Hill Path." The woman paused. "Next to the blue-skinned one." "I think so." She didn't say much, just nodded. The shopkeeper nodded slowly, then leaned in a little. "Be careful. She's from the Lyrini race, if she's unbonded. And this is the season. Just be aware." Daniel blinked. "What do you mean by that?" "She may act strange during this time," the shopkeeper said. "It's natural for them, but it can be difficult if they're alone. Keep your distance if she seems different." Daniel thanked her, a bit unsure what to make of the warning. Back at the duplex, everything was quiet again. He saw his neighbor briefly in the garden. She was watering her plants, moving slowly as if tired. Her skin looked even paler than before, and her eyes didn't meet his. That night, the sounds through the wall returned, but louder. There was a low humming sound, almost like a song, but broken and uneven. Then came soft knocking or bumping sounds. At one point, something thumped against the shared wall, making Daniel sit up straight in bed. He waited, listening. Nothing else followed for a while. No crying, no screaming, just quiet humming and movement. He couldn't help but worry. Was she sick? Was she in trouble? He thought about knocking on her door but stopped himself. Maybe this was normal for her kind. Maybe she didn't want help. Maybe the shopkeeper was right. It was just a part of her seasonal behavior. Whatever that meant. He didn't sleep well. The next day, Daniel walked around the back of the house to check on his solar panels again. As he passed near the fence that separated their yards, he heard a soft voice. "Daniel." He turned. It was her. She stood just beyond the fence, her hand gripping the wood, her eyes half closed. She looked exhausted. "Hi," he said carefully. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "If I act strange, please, don't come too close." Then she turned and walked away before he could say anything else. Daniel stood there, stunned. Something wasn't right. And whatever was happening, it was just the beginning. That night, Daniel sat on the couch, staring at the shared wall. He had finished dinner, cleaned up, and even tried watching a short movie on his datapad. But he couldn't stop thinking about what his neighbor had said. "If I act strange, please, don't come too close." Her voice had been soft, but filled with worry, almost like she was scared of herself. Daniel didn't know much about the Lyrini species. The shopkeeper had warned him. And now Lyra herself had given a strange warning too. He poured himself some water and sat quietly, listening. For a while, everything was peaceful. Then the sounds started again. A soft, uneven humming came from the other side of the wall. At first, it was quiet, almost like a tune. But soon, it became louder and more broken, like someone was struggling to sing but couldn't hold the melody. Then came the thumps. Not loud bangs, but dull, slow thumps, like someone bumping into walls or furniture. Daniel sat up and walked over to the wall. He gently placed his hand on it. The surface vibrated slightly. There was real movement happening in the other unit. He took a deep breath and stepped outside. Maybe he could check from the back window without bothering her. The night air was cold and crisp. Stars shone above, and strange insects clicked softly in the grass. He walked quietly around the building, keeping close to the wall. At the far end, he peeked into her garden. It was empty. Then he noticed a faint purple light flickering from her back window. Slowly, carefully, he stepped up to the side, stopping just before the window. He didn't want to invade her privacy, but something inside told him she might need help. He peeked. Lyra was pacing inside her home. Her hair was messy, and her skin was glowing a little more than usual. She kept rubbing her arms and whispering something he couldn't hear. Then suddenly, she gripped the table and leaned forward as if in pain. Daniel stepped back quickly, heart racing. He had seen enough to know that she wasn't okay. But what could he do? She told him not to come close, and she didn't want help from anyone, clearly trying to handle it herself. He returned to his side of the house and sat down again. He tried to think. Should he call someone? But who? This colony wasn't full of medical centers, and the shopkeeper's words came back to him. It's natural for them, but it can be difficult if they're alone. Daniel wondered, was she completely alone? The next morning, he didn't see her in the garden. Usually, even if she didn't say much, she'd be outside watering the plants or trimming the vines that grew along the fence. But this time, the space looked untouched. Daniel hesitated, then left a small basket near her front step with bottled water, a few fruits, and a note. "If you need anything, knock. Daniel." He didn't knock. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable. For the rest of the day, he kept himself busy fixing his solar rig and clearing weeds from his side of the garden. But every now and then, he glanced at her door. Still closed. That night, the sounds returned, but different this time. There was no humming. There was scratching. It came in slow, careful movements against the shared wall, like fingernails or claws dragging across it. Then came soft taps. 1, 2, 3, followed by silence. Daniel turned off the lights and sat on the floor near the wall, unsure of what he was doing or why. He just felt like she was trying to say something, or was holding something back. Then, for the first time, he heard her voice clearly through the wall. "Stay away." It was a whisper, trembling and tired, but it was her. Daniel spoke back, gently. "I'm still here, Lyra, just letting you know you're not alone." Silence followed. Then, a soft thud, like someone had sat down heavily on the other side. Daniel stayed there for a few minutes more, just breathing quietly. Then again, her voice, barely louder than before. "I'm losing control." Daniel's hands clenched. He didn't know what exactly was happening to her, but he could feel her struggling. Her words weren't just fear, they were desperation. She was fighting something deep within herself, and she was losing. He stood and looked toward the wall one last time before heading to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. This was no ordinary seasonal illness. Something deeper, stronger, and more dangerous was happening. And somehow, Daniel knew this was far from over. The next morning, Daniel woke up early, his mind still racing with thoughts about Lyra. He tried to focus on his work, replacing the filter on the water system and adjusting the power grid. But everything felt off. The strange sounds from the night before echoed in his head. He kept thinking about her whispered words. "I'm losing control." It made him uneasy. He didn't know what it meant, but it was clear she was in trouble. After a long morning of trying to stay busy, Daniel decided to go into the village again. Maybe he would find someone who knew more about the Lyrini species. He had to understand what was happening to Lyra. And if she needed help, he wanted to be prepared. The market was busy as usual, with locals selling everything from fresh fruits to mechanical parts. Daniel walked past stalls, scanning for anyone who might have useful information. He didn't see many humans. Most of the shoppers were aliens. He still felt like a stranger here, but the peaceful atmosphere was comforting. After a few minutes, he spotted the same shopkeeper from the day before. She was standing behind her counter, sorting through a basket of glowing herbs. Her forearms moved quickly, sorting the plants with practiced ease. Daniel walked over. "Excuse me, I have a question." The shopkeeper looked up and smiled. "Ah, the new neighbor. Is everything all right?" "I think so. I don't know much about the Lyrini species. I live next to one. Lyra, the blue-skinned woman." The shopkeeper's smile faded. She glanced around, as if making sure no one was listening, then leaned forward. "You have to be careful. They are not like humans. The Lyrini go through a special cycle once a year, a time when they are difficult to control." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, difficult to control?" The shopkeeper sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's called the mating season. During this time, the emotional and physical urges of the Lyrini become overwhelming. They cannot think clearly. They need to be restrained." Restraint. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "You mean, like, tied up?" "Yes," she nodded. "It's not just for their safety, but for everyone around them. If they don't have someone to control them, they may hurt themselves or others. It's a natural process for them, but it's very powerful." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. This was worse than he had imagined. He had heard strange noises through the wall, but the idea of Lyra needing restraint made his stomach twist. She was a neighbor, not a danger. She wasn't violent, was she? "What should I do? Is there someone I can call?" he asked, his voice tight. "There's no one but you, I'm afraid," the shopkeeper said with a gentle shake of her head. "The Lyrini do not like to involve outsiders. They consider this private. Most of them don't even want help." She paused. "But if you're living next to her, you may be the only one who can help her through this." Daniel felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He hadn't known what was going on with Lyra. He had heard the sounds and noticed the changes in her, but he had no idea this was coming. He had been worried about bothering her. Now he realized he might be the only one who could make sure she didn't hurt herself. The shopkeeper gave him a serious look. "It's not easy, what you're about to do. But if you want to help, you need to stay calm. And if she asks you to tie her up, you must do it. It's the only way to keep her safe." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand. Thank you." He paid for the herbs and left the shop, his thoughts swirling. He had to go back home, back to the duplex, and face Lyra. It felt like everything had changed. He wasn't just a neighbor anymore. He had a responsibility. Back at his duplex, Daniel found that the front door to Lyra's home was slightly ajar. He hesitated but then pushed it open gently. It felt wrong to intrude, but he needed to know if she was okay. Inside, The air was cooler than usual. The lights were dim, and Lyra was sitting on the floor, her legs drawn up to her chest. She looked up when he entered, her large purple eyes filled with something Daniel couldn't quite place. Fear, shame. She didn't speak, just watched him quietly. "Lyra," Daniel said softly, taking a step forward. She shook her head. "I don't want to hurt you, Daniel, but I don't know how much longer I can control it." The words hit him hard, and his heart sank. This wasn't just some strange condition she had. It was a full-on battle, one that she might lose if no one helped. "I don't want you to hurt yourself," Daniel said gently, his voice trembling with concern. "I was told I might need to help." Lyra looked at him for a long moment. She seemed so vulnerable. The powerful alien woman he had seen before was now fragile, needing help in a way that Daniel had never imagined. "Please," she whispered, "if I hurt you, I don't think I can forgive myself." Daniel walked closer and knelt down next to her. "I'm not going anywhere. I'll help you. Whatever you need." Lyra blinked slowly, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you." Daniel stood up and looked around. He knew what he had to do. With everything inside him, he hoped that this was the right decision. He couldn't leave her like this. He had to make sure she was safe. Daniel stood here, his hands trembling. Lyra's plea echoed in his mind. "If I hurt you, I don't think I can forgive myself." He had never imagined he would be in a situation like this. Helping someone was one thing, but this was something else entirely. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do, but he knew he couldn't turn his back on her now. He had been told that this was a natural part of her cycle, something the Larini went through every year. But that didn't make it any less frightening. Her behavior was becoming unpredictable, and if she couldn't control herself, things might get worse. "Lyra, I don't want you to hurt yourself," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm here to help." She looked up at him, her large purple eyes filled with a mixture of fear and relief. "I don't want to hurt anyone, Daniel. But the urges, they're too strong." Daniel nodded slowly, trying to find the right words. He didn't want to make her feel worse or more embarrassed. He wanted her to feel safe, to trust him. "I know this is hard," he said, "but you're not alone. I'll be here to help you through this. We'll get through it together." Lyra seemed to relax slightly at his words. She looked down at the floor, her hands clutched tightly together. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this under control," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel stepped forward, kneeling beside her. He had never seen her so vulnerable, so fragile. The strong, silent neighbor who kept to herself was now showing him a side of herself that he hadn't expected to see. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You can trust me." There was a long silence as Lyra stared at the floor, her chest rising and falling with each breath. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be tied up," she said, looking up at Daniel. "But I don't want to hurt you either. Please, don't think less of me." Daniel's heart ached as he looked at her. He could see the struggle in her eyes, the inner conflict that she was trying so hard to control. He could feel her pain, and it was clear that she didn't want to hurt anyone, least of all him. "I don't think less of you, Lyra," he said softly. "I'm here to help you, not judge you. You don't have to be alone in this." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away. I don't know what to do," she admitted. "It's like the world is spinning, and I can't stop it." Daniel reached out and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. He knew that this wasn't going to be easy, but he also knew that she needed help. She had come to him for a reason, because she trusted him, even though they barely knew each other. "You don't have to do this alone," he repeated. "I'll stay with you, okay? We'll take it one step at a time." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. For the first time since the cycle began, she seemed to find a little peace in his words. But Daniel could see the war inside her. The Larini were powerful creatures, and this was more than just a physical condition. It was an emotional battle she had to fight every year. "I don't want to lose control," Lyra whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't want to hurt you. Please, Daniel, tie me up if you have to." Daniel's heart clenched, and he felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He didn't want to do this. He didn't want to tie her up, to restrain her in any way. But he also didn't want her to hurt herself or anyone else. This was a part of who she was, something beyond her control, and he had to be strong for her. "I will," he said softly, his voice steady, "but only because I know it's the right thing to do. I won't let you hurt yourself." Lyra nodded, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she seemed to relax a little. The tension in her body loosened, but the fear was still there, just beneath the surface. Daniel stood up, his hands shaking as he prepared to do what was necessary. He had no idea how this would end, but he couldn't let fear stop him. He had to protect her, even if that meant doing something that felt unnatural. He gently but firmly took a soft, hatted rope from a corner of the room and moved toward Lyra. "This is for your safety," he said. "I promise I won't hurt you." Lyra closed her eyes and nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're the first person who's cared." Daniel felt a lump in his throat as he carefully and gently tied the rope around her wrists, making sure it wasn't too tight but still secure. He worked quickly but with great care, making sure she wasn't in any pain. When it was done, he stepped back and looked at her. Lyra sat there, breathing heavily, her body still tense, but no longer fighting against the urge to break free. "I'm here," he said softly. "You're safe now. Just take a deep breath, and we'll get through this." Lyra's eyes met his, filled with a mix of gratitude and sadness. "Thank you," she said again, her voice soft. "I didn't think anyone would understand." Daniel nodded. "You don't have to go through this alone. I'm not leaving. We'll make it through together." As he sat beside her, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about helping a neighbor. It was about helping someone who needed him in a way that he hadn't expected. The cycle wasn't over, but maybe, just maybe, they could face it together. Daniel sat beside Lyra, his hands still shaking slightly from the task of restraining her. He hadn't expected things to escalate this quickly, but now that they were here, there was no turning back. He couldn't help but look at her. Her purple eyes, filled with a mix of gratitude and embarrassment, seemed to pierce through him. It wasn't just the physical restraint. It was the emotional weight of the situation that felt heavy on both of them. Lyra was sitting quietly on the floor, her arms securely tied. She had stopped trembling for the moment, though the tension in her body was still evident. Her breathing had slowed, but Daniel could see the emotional struggle written all over her face. She was fighting something inside, something she couldn't control. The silence between them felt thick, but Daniel knew they couldn't stay like this forever. He had to make sure she was safe, but he also needed to understand more about her situation. The strange sounds, the pain, the fear, it was all building up inside him. He couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, not when she was clearly struggling. "Lyra," Daniel said softly, breaking the silence. "Tell me more about this cycle. I want to understand. I want to help." Lyra's gaze dropped to the floor. She didn't answer right away, as if she was trying to gather her thoughts. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and quiet. "The mating season is different for every Lyrini. It happens once a year, and for most of us, it's a time of intense emotions, physical urges. It's natural. But when we're unbonded, like I am, it's much harder to control. It's overwhelming. And when it's not managed, it can cause us to act out in dangerous ways." Daniel nodded, trying to process her words. He had heard the shopkeeper's warning, but hearing it from Lyra herself made it so much more real. "Do all Lyrini go through this?" Daniel asked. "Yes," Lyra replied, her voice barely a whisper. "But not all of us are alone during this time. Some have companions. They help keep us grounded, keep us from losing control. But when I left my home, I didn't have anyone. I didn't want to stay around people who might think badly of me. So I came here." Daniel's heart sank as he listened. She had come here to escape, to hide, because she thought she might hurt someone. And now, she was stuck, alone. But even as she explained herself, Daniel couldn't help but feel something else. It wasn't just pity, it was a sense of responsibility. She was his neighbor, and right now, that meant something more than just sharing a wall. "Lyra, you don't have to be alone," Daniel said, his voice firm. "I'm here. You don't have to hide from anyone." Lyra looked up at him, her purple eyes searching his face, as if looking for some kind of reassurance. "You don't understand. You don't know what it feels like when the urges start. When everything becomes too much. I'm scared, Daniel. I don't want to hurt you." Daniel reached over, placing a hand on her shoulder, as gentle as he could. "I'm not scared of you, Lyra. I know you're not dangerous. But I can't leave you like this. I'll help you get through this, one step at a time." Lyra's eyes filled with tears again, and she looked away quickly, trying to hide her emotions. "I don't want to be weak," she whispered. "I don't want to be someone who needs help all the time. I've always been strong. But this is too much." Daniel didn't know what to say at first. He could see her struggle with her own pride. She wanted to be independent, to handle things on her own, but the reality was that she couldn't. Not now, not with this cycle overwhelming her mind and body. "You don't have to do this alone," Daniel said softly. "You've been strong for so long. But now it's okay to lean on someone else. It's okay to let someone help." Lyra's breath hitched in her chest, and for a moment, she seemed to relax slightly. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Daniel felt a small sense of relief. He wasn't sure how this would all end, but at least she was starting to trust him. That was something. But the situation wasn't over. Lyra was still tied up, still battling the urges that came with her cycle. And although she seemed calmer for the moment, Daniel knew this was far from over. She needed time, and she needed a plan. "How long does this last?" Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Usually, a few days," Lyra said, her voice shaky. "The worst of it. After that, it fades. But the first day or two are the hardest. After that, I'll be able to think more clearly. But until then, I don't know if I can keep control." Daniel stood up, pacing back and forth for a moment. He was feeling a little overwhelmed, but he knew he couldn't let that show. Lyra needed him to be strong now. He took a deep breath, thinking about what he had to do next. "All right," he said, turning back to her. "We're going to make it through this, Lyra. We'll take it one day at a time. If you need anything, just let me know. I'm here for you." Lyra nodded slowly, her expression still filled with uncertainty, but there was a small glimmer of hope in her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, they could make it through this together. Daniel took another deep breath, his mind racing with the uncertainty of the days ahead. This wasn't going to be easy, but he couldn't back down now. Not when Lyra needed him. The night had fallen, and the quiet of Terran 4 seemed almost too peaceful for what Daniel and Lyra were going through. Inside the duplex, the air was still, save for the soft hum of the cooling system. Lyra sat against the wall, her legs drawn to her chest, her arms still bound loosely to the support post. Daniel was sitting across from her, doing his best to remain calm. He had never been in a situation like this before. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do or how he could help. All he knew was that he had to stay strong. He couldn't let fear control him. Not now. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, watching Lyra carefully. She had been quiet for a while now, but he could tell she was still struggling. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes tired but grateful. "I'm okay, I think. It's just hard to stay calm." "I know," Daniel said softly, "but you're doing well. We'll get through this together." She smiled faintly, but the sadness in her eyes didn't disappear. "I've never been this vulnerable before. I've always been able to control myself. But now, it's like I'm losing myself." Daniel nodded, understanding more than she probably realized. It wasn't just the physical urges she had to fight against, it was the emotional toll as well. She was fighting an internal battle that Daniel could only imagine. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. The occasional sound of the wind outside, or the chirping of the insects in the distance, was the only noise in the room. Daniel got up after a few moments and walked to the small kitchenette. He grabbed a bottle of water and returned to Lyra, handing it to her gently. She took it without a word, her hands shaking slightly as she brought it to her lips. "Do you need anything else?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. He wanted to help her, to make things easier for her, but he didn't know what she needed. Lyra shook her head slowly. "I just need time. I just need this to pass." Her voice was barely a whisper. Daniel sat back down, his mind racing. He couldn't help but feel that time was running out. He didn't know how long she could hold on, and he didn't know how much longer he could keep her tied up. He had promised her he wouldn't let her hurt herself, but how long would it take before she felt like herself again? The thought of leaving her like this for too long made his chest tighten. The silence stretched between them, but Daniel's thoughts kept coming back to one question: what if she couldn't make it through this alone? He wasn't sure how much longer she could fight this on her own, and he wasn't sure if he could bear to see her struggle for much longer. He stood up again and began pacing around the room, trying to think of anything he could do to make her feel better, or at least to ease her pain. He had never been good at sitting still while someone else was in pain, especially when he knew there was something he could do. Suddenly, Lyra spoke again, her voice quiet but firm. "Daniel," she said, and he stopped in his tracks, looking at her. "I need to ask something of you." "What is it?" he replied, his heart racing. Lyra looked at him for a long time before she spoke again. "When the worst of this is over, when I can think clearly again, I don't want to leave this place. I don't want to leave you." Her voice broke slightly as she said the last part, and Daniel's heart softened. "I'm not going anywhere," he said without hesitation. "We'll get through this, I promise." Lyra nodded, her eyes closing for a moment as she took a deep breath. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not leaving." Daniel didn't know what to say. There were no words for the gratitude he felt in that moment. He had always known that helping someone meant being there for them, but this was different. He had never expected to be the one person who could help her in such a profound way. He walked back over to her, sitting down beside her. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the deep weariness from the battle she was fighting. And while he couldn't truly understand what it was like for her, he knew that he couldn't let her do it alone. "I'm here, Lyra," he said softly, "and I'm not going anywhere. I'll stay with you through this, no matter how long it takes." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you." For a long while, they sat in silence, the night stretching on. The stars outside twinkled in the sky, their light casting soft shadows across the room. Lyra was still tied up, but Daniel could see the tension in her body beginning to ease just a little. The worst of it hadn't passed, but for now, they were both holding on. Daniel wasn't sure how the rest of the night would go, but he knew one thing: he wouldn't leave her. Not now, not ever. He would help her through this, no matter what it took, and in return, he would help himself by knowing that, at least for tonight, he wasn't alone in this fight. The night had passed slowly, but as the first light of dawn filtered through the windows of the duplex, things had calmed. The worst of Lyra's struggle seemed to have passed, but Daniel could still see the strain in her eyes. She had been through a lot, and he knew that even though she was quieter now, it wasn't over. She was still fighting herself, trying to keep control. Daniel had stayed by her side all night. He had kept his promise, staying strong for her, even when the situation felt overwhelming. He had no idea what she was going through, but he felt the weight of it in every moment they shared. Now, as the morning sun began to rise higher in the sky, Daniel looked at Lyra with a mix of concern and admiration. She had been strong for so long, holding on through the cycle, but she was still struggling. He knew this was only the beginning of her recovery, but it was a small victory. She was still here, and they were both still standing. "Lyra," Daniel said softly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "How do you feel?" She took a slow breath, her eyes still distant but softer than before. "I feel better," she said quietly, her voice hoarse. "But I still don't know what to do. It's like I'm still trapped in a fog." Daniel nodded, sitting down beside her. "I understand. You've been through a lot, but you don't have to fight alone anymore." She looked at him then, her gaze searching his face, as though trying to understand if he truly meant what he was saying. And maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to believe it. "I'd never had anyone offer to help me like this," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can accept it. I don't want to be weak." Daniel shook his head. "You're not weak. You've been incredibly strong. But even the strongest people need help sometimes. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Lyra was silent for a moment, considering his words. The vulnerability in her eyes was more visible now. She had spent so long trying to keep everything under control, trying to be strong on her own, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she was beginning to realize that it was okay to let go of that burden. It was okay to need someone. "I've never felt so lost before," she admitted softly, her voice trembling. "I've always known who I was, what I needed to do. But now, everything feels different, like I'm not in control of my own body." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, offering her a comforting touch. "I can't imagine what that feels like, but I'm here to help you find yourself again. We can take it slow, step by step." Lyra met his gaze, her expression uncertain but filled with a quiet hope. "You don't know how much this means to me," she said, her voice shaky with emotion. "You've been so kind, so patient. I don't deserve this." Daniel smiled, his heart warming at her words. "You do deserve it. You deserve to feel safe, to feel like you have someone on your side. I'm not going anywhere, Lyra. I'll help you through this, no matter how long it takes." She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, as if she were trying to center herself. When she opened her eyes again, they were filled with something different, a spark of determination, a glimmer of strength she hadn't shown before. "Thank you, Daniel," she said, her voice steadier now. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Daniel's heart swelled with relief. He had feared that his presence wouldn't be enough, that he wouldn't be able to make her feel better. But now he could see the change in her, the subtle shift from fear to hope. She was beginning to trust him, and that trust meant more than he had ever expected. "I won't ever give up on you," he replied. "You don't have to face this alone." The rest of the day passed slowly. Lyra, though still fragile, seemed to find a little more peace. Daniel kept his promise, staying by her side and offering what support he could. They talked more about her past, about the Lyrini species and their traditions. Daniel listened, learning about the struggles she had faced her whole life, the expectations placed on her, and how difficult it was to break free from those expectations. It wasn't easy, but as the hours passed, Lyra seemed to become more like herself. She started to speak with more confidence, her voice steadier. The fog that had clouded her mind was beginning to lift, and Daniel could see the woman she was before the cycle had begun to return. She was strong, stronger than she had given herself credit for. By evening, she was sitting up straighter, her hands no longer trembling. She looked at Daniel and smiled, a small, genuine smile that made Daniel's heart swell. "Thank you, Daniel," she said again, her voice calm and steady, "for everything." "You don't need to thank me," he replied, smiling back. "We're in this together." And as the stars began to fill the sky outside, Daniel realized that what had started as a simple act of kindness, offering help to a neighbor, had turned into something much more. He wasn't just helping Lyra anymore. They were helping each other. They weren't alone anymore.